And a very good morning to you. This is Fagaza Presents In Conversation With. I'm your host, David Batzofin, and today my guest is the 2011 winner of the Safari Guide of the Year competition. That's Greg Lederle. Greg, good morning. Welcome to you.
Benny, thanks, David. It's lovely to be on the show. Thanks for inviting me.
It's only a pleasure. 2011, it's literally a decade ago. If you count 2020 as 2 years.
Exactly. Nobody's counting 2020 for anyone, so it could be 9 years ago. But no, 2011, when you do look back on just how this competition has grown and how brilliantly it's done and the exposure that it's gotten, it's wonderful, to look back on those on 2011, which we do obviously with fond memories. But yes, it is, a decade ago now, and can't believe how the time has flown since then.
Where was the competition held in 2011?
It was held at Ntsiri, which obviously is part of the greater Kruger. And, we were able to obviously conduct, game drives and walks, et cetera, et cetera. And, it was a perfect platform to run through the various elements of the competition. So it really provided a homely feel, which was wonderful.
Ntsiri is now part of Klaseri Sands, which is, as you say, the part of Greater Kruger.
Correct, yeah.
My only connection to that is that after 53 years of waiting, I saw my first pangolin in Klaseri Sands in November 2019.
That is still an achievement. Look, it doesn't matter how many times anybody's ever seen them, it'll remain sort of the oracle. It's like the unicorn of game drives.
It was, and I don't know about you, and I know we're just digressing a little. The Aardvark took the top spot, after that. And 6 months later, I was at another reserve. And what do we find walking down in the middle of the road, 4 o'clock in the afternoon? An Aardvark. And the guide was saying, it's winter and they come out late in the afternoon because it's coolish. Next morning, slightly different part of the park. The same Aardvark, 11:30 in the morning. So we stopped and had a chat with it and said, listen, did you not get the memo? You're not allowed out in the mornings. You're only nocturnal or late afternoon.
Well, the animals never read the guidebook, so
unfortunately not. Greg, take me back, if you would, to Greg Lederle in matric. Did you know what you wanted to be then?
Absolutely. I had zero doubt in my mind. We just didn't know which avenue of natural history I was going to end up in. I was very fortunate to go to a wonderful school. That part of the school had a game reserve. So from the age of 13, a passion that I'd had but wasn't able to express, we were able to head out with older boys and start learning to bird. Some of the guys knew a little bit about the tracks. Obviously nothing compared to what a guide knows, but it was there that sort of the true passion was fostered, and I was able to realize these dreams and to then focus more of my energy into research as to how does one now take the following step. And from there I went into sort of tertiary education and pursued a passion for conservation and nature.
And when you were nominated, you were working at Malori, which is a camp in one of my favorite reserves, which is Madikwe.
Correct, yeah. So my wife and I we'd actually gone across to Malori in 2005, where we'd facilitated in completing the build and then adding 2 fantastic presidential suites at Malori Safari Lodge, which are absolutely breathtaking. And that was home for almost 7 years, and we've still got part of our bush family up there, and so it's a camp and obviously a game reserve that's very close to my heart.
Now, what was it like when you found out, the envelope, please type of thing, that firstly you were a nominee? What did that mean to you?
Well, I must be honest, David, it came as a surprise because I'd never entered. In fact, I hadn't heard of the competition. And one of the guides in Madikwe had nominated me to to Brian Serrao and said, listen, I think, maybe get Greg Lederle on. And then I got the call from Brian, and he said, Greg, you've how about coming in for an interview? And I said, for what? And he said, no, for Safari. Back then it was Ranger of the Year, which they changed the name. And I said, but I didn't enter. And he said, no, you've been entered. Somebody's nominated your name. So I was like, okay. And then, we worked out a time that I was going to be in Johannesburg and went through. And I'm not sure how many entrants there were in that first year. And I think they whittled it down on the interviews to 20. And then there was a second interview process. And then they whittled that down to, I think it was 8 entrants. I'll need to verify that though. Yeah, 8 or 10.
Okay. And what was the competition like? I participated. I was at the Guide of the Year 2019 as part of the media contingent. And it was interesting to see those top 5 settling down, looking, I sat in on the birding exam. And I think I got 2. And one of those was a dove. But it was interesting to see that even those top 5 guides, there were spaces on certain of their papers. Not everybody knows everything, and I don't think you can be expected to do that.
Well, I think David, you've touched on something that's very important. Is if you really want to test a guide's true knowledge, you must put him amongst guides. And I think this is what's wonderful about the competition is you're rubbing shoulders with people that you may have heard of, or that you've known, or that they're complete strangers that you're meeting for the first time. And as a guide, and every guide is guilty of this, where at some point, either early in your career or you don't have an answer, you sort of come up with the not real truth. And nobody on the vehicle or on your walk can really verify it because they're just fascinated with this wealth of knowledge, et cetera, et cetera. But when you're amongst guides, there is an element of questioning in your own mind and in your own heart before you put a piece of information out, and especially with a panel of judges of, very well-respected, television personalities or very well-respected guides within the industry, and other people that are as forming part of the judge panel and a few guests. It really does, I think it brings out the refinement in a guide's better positions and better opinions. And as you say, the competition back then was fantastic. I don't know how much it has changed. I'd love to be invited back sometime as even as a guest, just to tag along. It was a fantastic time and experience altogether. And I'm not sure how much the competition's changed in terms of the element of storytelling, all the way through to the bird competition, the shooting, et cetera, and tracking. But going back to what you said about the birding is, when you're on a game drive or on a walk and you're hearing a nocturnal bird calling, at 11 o'clock in the morning, it's out of context. So now you're in the competition and you've got a nightjar calling, but it's not your fiery neck, which everybody knows. It's, one of the more challenging ones. And you sit there and you're like, oof, and now you're thinking, because, your diurnal clock's on, it's not in a relevant place, or you're hearing a fish eagle or another bird calling, and you're like, well, hang on, we're not close to water necessarily. So it can really throw you out. And I think that's where the competition, it does need to be able to define certain things, to have an accuracy of where is your knowledge and where are you at in terms of various elements. But like any golfer or sports person or any human being on earth, you could just be having an off day. Yeah. And the competition, as what I think I said to you in previously, is that any of the entrants are capable of winning it. And it just comes down to maybe certain things that are just done in a particular way, or whatever it is that just gets somebody's nose in front of your colleagues or your competitors.
The email that you sent me earlier this week that sort of got us to this point mentions one word. And this word has come up again and again and again in guides that I've been talking to while I've been in the bush, while I've been working with Fugaza for the last year, and other training facilitators before that. And that's the word humble. And I believe that if you're not, and you decide to be one of those guys that can wear tight shorts and a tight shirt, and just, you know, cruise through everything without a care in the world, you're going to get caught short. But the bush humbles you. And if you are prepared to accept that, it'll make you a much better human being and a more intuitive guide. You won't just be spewing book knowledge.
Exactly. No, exactly. And, you know, the thing is, the humility that we like to see in no matter what industry it's in, but particularly because we're all involved in hospitality and guiding, it is a wonderful attribute, because you do have a captive market, you do have a captive audience when you're sitting in a sighting and you've got 6 international guests or people from, you know, local, you know, Johannesburg or Cape Town or whatever. You do need to show humility, because you never know if the person who's sitting on the back who says that they're, you know, from New York might have spent some time studying entomology and you just don't know about it. Yep. You never know where your own, if you are going to be arrogant or you do find yourself getting, you know, too big for your own boots, it, you know, karma does have a way of sort of coming around and just saying, okay, back in your box, settle down, you know, ego aside, and you know, be the better person. And this is where this competition is so phenomenal. And, you know, the brainchild, the people who developed this should get full, you know, praise for this, is by putting a lot of these guides together, it does bring out humility, because all of a sudden you might be sitting there with somebody who's an exceptional tracker, and yet you might have a strength in birding, or you might have somebody who's very good on game drives, and now you're going for a walk with somebody who's an absolute maestro on foot.
Yeah.
You begin to see the diversity that is actually involved in this industry, you know, and that's where the you know, by as you say, being humble, you allow for everybody to have their say and to learn from other people. You know, the person or the guide who feels that they're not, or feel the need to learn anymore, is the one who's dead in the water.
Yeah. If you don't wake up every day and learn something new, you're just repeating the day before, and you'll repeat the next day ad nauseum until you die. And you'll die an old person with the same knowledge that you had as a young one, thinking that you scored. The only thing I want to die with is the knowledge that I gave up maths in what was then standard 8, and I've never needed to use algebra. That's all I need to know. Nothing else.
When I did 1 year of forestry in Stellenbosch University in order to do nature conservation in my 3rd year. And the first year subjects was mathematics, statistics, chemistry. And I was sitting there going, I just want to go to the bush. You know, I need to know about grasses and soils and trees and animals and erosion. I need to know that sort of thing. And I'm doing maths, so I didn't complete that year. I didn't I'm in your boat.
Greg, what did the win mean for you? I know that, as we said earlier, you were at Mallory when you won. You've gone on to start your own safari company now. Do you think that Safari Guide of the Year enabled you to do that, or was it something that you planned anyway?
I think, you know, to answer your you know, whether it was something that enabled us to start a business, the business side of it, you know, there's various elements that Safari Guide of the Year couldn't provide. You know, and, you know, to start a business, you need contacts in, you know, source countries like the United States or overseas. So in terms of starting a business, it may not have contributed to that sort of side. But what it did bring is credibility. So if somebody from overseas said, look, Greg, we'd like you to guide us when we're on our trip, you know, come to South Africa or to Botswana or whatever, they could see, hang on, he has won an award, and therefore there is credibility towards that. And I think the one thing that it meant the most to me, and I'm sure that any guide who's listening to this has had this conversation, or if they're new to the industry will have this conversation at some point, is very often, you know, being a game ranger or a field a safari guide at a lodge, is often viewed as, okay, this is a great sort of gap year or two, you know, before you go on to becoming, you know, or doing a real job. And this is the one thing that even after winning, we were chatting with, it was actually televised in 2011, which was wonderful. But it was to bring exposure to just how wonderful this industry is, and to bring that sort of credibility, you know, for the world's opinions and the people that go on safari to look at it as such a diverse and multifaceted skill set that guides need to have. You still need to be able to sit and have a conversation around various topics away from conservation or away from nature as your guests sit and discuss politics of the country that you're in, or the future, or they talk about their own politics. Then you've still got to go through and build your own sort of foundational knowledge on, starting at the bottom with, you know, your geology and your soils, and all the way through your grasses, all the way to your trees and your birds, your mammals, your behavior, all the way to climatology, to stars. So in terms of, you might be a master in birds because that's your passion, or a particularly good tracker. You still have to have a fantastic diversity of knowledge and a persona that can sit down and talk and tell a story. And at the same time, which we spoke about earlier, is not to try and be the belle of the ball all the time, but to be able to sit there and allow people their sort of spot in the sunshine, and to step back, and because it's not your experience, you're providing the experience for somebody else. So for me, the win, I hope, was going to facilitate, and this is exactly what the competition, I believe, has done, is just to bring about more credibility to what is a fantastic and wonderful career to be a part of.
So I think you've partly answered what was going to be my next question, is what words of wisdom do you have for the upcoming nominees for 2021?
Sure. I don't want to sound cliched, but, you know, just try and enjoy the whole moment. You know, you're there with some very, very good guides who are your colleagues or people that you may know. So listen, try and learn and share as much as you can, you know, by putting guides together. That's sometimes, or the way that I see, the best way for knowledge to be shared. And if you can walk away from the entire competition enriched and a better guide as a result of having spent this time together, whether you've got the trophy with you or not, just by being there and in the competition and getting that far is already an achievement, in my opinion. Because I think going from 2011, when we were all in the competition together, I think to today, there's a lot more interviews, there's a lot more people applying. And it's also a great achievement to actually say, you know what, I'm going to back myself and I'm going to give it a go. You know, because you are kind of putting your neck out there, you know, because you do have guides that have got 20 years experience. There's some people that have been involved in nature for 30 years who are now sitting in the back of your vehicle or walking behind you or watching you shoot. You know, you're going to have judges that have got 10,000 hours of walking experience in Big Five areas. So it does take a certain amount of courage to, you know, back yourself.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to ask questions. If you've heard something for the first time, ask them to divulge on it. Ask them to expand on that. Or later when you're back at camp, have another chat about it. And don't be afraid to show enough humility to be able to go and say, I'd like to talk to you about this. I didn't know that was it. I'd always thought this, or I never knew it before. But just to enjoy it, you know, because it goes very quickly.
Great stuff. Greg, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a pleasure chatting to you. I hope that your words are inspirational to the nominees for 2021, and the batch of finalists will meet the criteria and meet the expectations that were set all the way back in 2011 by yourself and the other nominees of that particular year.
Fantastic, David. Thank you very much for having me.
He's Greg Lederle. I'm David Batzofin, and this has been In Conversation With.